sent a pile of invoices to the New York Post. And, well, there was a lo and behold, a story about how she's evading taxes, and Rudy Giuliani ended up prosecuting her. Wow. And one guy, there's another real estate mogul, Donald J. Trump, went out and said that Leona Helmsley was a disgrace to humanity.
Yeah, he danced all over the indictments.
Absolutely.
As it were in this case. No small irony there. The Trump organization is a family business.
Right.
In the Trump organization also named this indictment. This is the former president's family business being hauled before the courts and charged with crimes. And I don't think that should be lost on people. But based on what you saw, I think this is worse for Alan Weisselberg than everyone was expecting.
Absolutely.
The question, though, is could it or can it be tied to Donald Trump? What are the chances? You've got some personal experience with this, that Donald Trump was completely oblivious to this alleged tax scheme going on in his company?
Well, I mean, my personal experience is limited to the fact that I bought an apartment once from the Trump organization on the East Side. And one of the things that happened when I signed the contract is I sent multiple copies of the contract over to the lawyers, and the lawyers sent them back to me. And lo and behold, Donald J. Trump's signature was on it. And as we later learned through press reports, I mean, he paid attention, very close attention to what went on in his business. He paid attention to these contracts. He paid attention to what checks were being written. And in fact, the indictment says that he actually cut a couple of the checks that went to paying off Weisselberg's expenses. And and the thing to remember about the Trump organization, which everyone knows and it's been well reported, is it really was it still is a small organization. And not too many people actually are involved in the major aspects of the business. And so that's the question, is whether or not the prosecutors could prove criminal intent as to something that may have been misreported. And for that, they probably would need an insider, since he doesn't use email and he doesn't, so that's where Weisselberg comes in.
And even then, given, as you rightly point out, the lack of documentation, no email, rips up calendars, et cetera, even if you were to have that person, may it be Weisselberg or someone else, to say there was intentionality here, a pattern of it over years, even then, it's still difficult, is it not?
Yeah, it's still difficult because, again, the prosecution has to prove, in any case, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. And here you're proving criminal intent, what's going on in somebody's mind. So that's why, again, documents can play a big role here. The documents, as for Weisselberg, they seem to have him dead to rights. But and they also apparently may have testimony of the controller who worked for Weisselberg. And in the case of Trump, you probably need somebody who's talked to Trump and about these matters and can say, yeah, well, he knew exactly what was going on. And that would be Alan Weisselberg, which explains the focus on him.
How uncomfortable will this be for the former president? The children, the Trump children, by the way, who are running the company, how uncomfortable will this be for them over the next 12 months?
Well, if I were, owned a small family business with a small number of people, and I'm in business, we're under criminal investigation, I'd be very, very worried. And then there are questions about whether or not these practices of keeping two sets of books for purposes of paying people were extended to other people. There's apparently a suggestion that it was. And the question is whether they extended to the family. I mean, there were reports about, I think in the New York Times, that Ivanka Trump received consulting fees for matters that it wasn't clear she was actually involved in. And maybe that was an attempt to avoid gift tax. Who knows?
I want to move on to another